to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, I'm your host, Jared Sebest. I'm the co-founder of Retire Repurposed alongside Ben Tages. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you're listening to us on the radio. Maybe you found us online. Regardless, head over to iTunes, find our podcast, click subscribe, and if you would, just leave us a quick positive rating and review. If you would just take a moment and do that, we would appreciate that so much. Now, this podcast is all about retirement, but it's not just about money. It's about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. Few people could just flip the switch from working a career maybe 30, 40, 50 plus years, then retiring on Retirement Friday without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. If you want more for your life and your retirement, then you have come to the right place. Well, on this episode, we break down the childhood fable, The Ant and the Grasshopper. If you're familiar with that story, the ant is usually heralded as the wise one working and saving for the future. However, is this correct? In this podcast, Ben explains ways both the ant and the grasshopper were wrong. And Ben also shares how conventional retirement planning wisdom is misguided, leading people to live a life of life deferral. Enjoy this episode. All right, we are back, and we are going to have a really special show on tap here today talking about the ant and the grasshopper and how this applies to life, how it applies to retirement, and even how it applies to maybe saving for retirement. So we got a lot to cover in today's show. Just a quick reminder, we have a brand new Facebook group called Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Join a growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. Look for more tips on living repurposed, Facebook Lives, and Q&A sessions with Ben and myself. Join today by going to Facebook and search Becoming Repurposed. Again, facebook.com, search Becoming Repurposed, and click join to be a part of this community of people ready to make their retirement everything it was supposed to be. Man, we've got almost 200 members in that group. Fun group, got lots of great content in there. Blogs get posted in there, kind of special content every Friday afternoon. I like to head on in there. And so that's been a really good group for us. And again, this ties back to a lot of kind of the last several episodes because we just wrapped up a mini-series on specific retiree profiles. If any folks out there listening missed some of those shows, Ben, let's do a little recap of what those 4 shows were all about.
Yeah, let's do that. I think one of the cool things about that group too, Jared, is we always talk about in retirement or getting closer to retirement, there's going to be a change in the people that, I mean, if you're leaving the workplace, some of your social connections getting lost. We want people to plug back in, and part of that is online, but plugging into people that are going through the same thing you're going through, potentially the people in your area that are really dealing with the same things, and we know how important community is. So please do check that out, and see and meet some other people that are going through what you're going through.
Got lots of people from all over the country in that group as well, so that's another place to find a little community, people on the same journey, so that's great. Back on episode 95, we talked about the Have I Done Enough retiree. Then we covered the Just Want to Have Fun retiree. Then we covered the Never Gonna Give It Up. Ben, we're stationed here in West Central Minnesota, generally in an agricultural type of environment. Whenever I hear the Never Gonna Give It Up, my mind instantly goes to that person.
Yeah, the farmer typically has a harder time. I see it done really well many times, but we do know that it's a hard thing when your career, when you don't have a job, and I think we've differentiated a job versus a career before. And I think people who are very career trying to build a business, they do have a hard time sometimes just saying, hey, I'm never going to stop doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a retirement plan. I think there's a more optimal way to be able to unwind it, be able to pass along some of that business, whatever it may be, and prepare the next steward. That's a huge part of being repurposed and some of the things that the Never Gonna Give It Ups tend to struggle with. We talked about the worried about money retiree last week, and this is another specific sliver, if you want to call it, of retirees that have kind of a defining characteristic that is exclusive to them.
Yeah, and we didn't talk much about folks that should be worried about money. I think that is potentially an issue out there. Some people just don't prepare, don't have haven't done that for years, or they should be getting their affairs in order. We're more talking to somebody who we know does have enough. Somebody that is their daily mood gets tied to whatever the market's doing, even though they have well prepared.
Right.
And that's the person we're talking to on that show. And it was fun just to go through that. I've been in the financial side of retirement for many years now, almost 20 years, and I can tell you that I've had several meetings where somebody brings up the idea that they're not having a very good day. And I'll ask, why not? And we'll get through that as well. The markets, did you not see, Ben, did you not see how the markets are doing today?
Right.
And I have to bring it back to that is a short-term thing. We have to remember not to base our mood or how we're feeling every day based on that. So that was a good show kind of for that person who has prepared well and now actually find some of that preparation, what they've done, causing them, they built the wealth, and now actually being really holding on to it is actually the hard part.
Well, again, there's a fear of not leaving enough to the next generation. So in that show, we talked about how they actually have more of a lack of a wealth transfer plan than a lack of enough funds. And that was a big part of last week's show. And that's an important topic when it comes to this idea of being repurposed. It's about preparing the net steward and starting to unload that money while you can. The earlier the better. That's what a wealth transfer plan is.
Yeah, and I've gotten a little bit of feedback actually on that show where somebody said, you said that not dying and giving a bunch of wealth to the next generation is a very selfish way to do it. And I stand by that. I believe that if you're doing it that way, what traditionally people have done for years is like, I'm going to hold everything on, hold everything really tight, right? And then at some point die, and then they can have it, and then they can sort it out.
Right.
I think it's a very selfish way to give, even though really it's not necessarily that you're holding on to it, it's that you're not doing it quick enough.
Right. Or you're not letting go of it. You're letting go of it whenever you may die, which may be tomorrow, maybe in 10, 20 years, who knows?
Yeah, and you're giving what's left over.
Right.
You're not giving the beginnings. I think you can tie that also into the way we look at money and how you have to be a good steward, right? We know that God owns it all, so start with that paradigm and then go from there.
Well, again, dead people can't give away money. Dead people also can't prepare the next steward either. So those are two major factors. And again, that all comes into play when we start talking about this idea of a wealth transfer plan. If any of that struck a chord with you and you missed the last several weeks worth of shows, go back on iTunes. Again, make sure you subscribe, but check out the last several episodes because we covered a lot of topics, and I think a lot of folks out there listening will resonate with a lot of the things that we talked about over those past couple of shows. All right, Ben, we're going to switch gears here pretty hard. And we're going to talk about kind of this idea of a balance between life, a balance between experiences, and a balance between saving for the future over the next several shows. And this is something that's kind of been on our heart here as of late. But we titled today's show "The Ant and the Grasshopper." So there's a famous fable out there, a childhood fable or story that a lot of you probably have heard. But this is going to be kind of the foundation of today's show. Where do you want to start with this one, Ben?
Well, Jared, I happen to know this about you, but I know you've told me you read stories to your children at night, correct? Your young children?
I do.
So why don't you read The Ant and the Grasshopper? So some people may not have heard this.
Yeah, well, you're putting me on the spot here, but I do have it here. It's real short, but let's start with this. So this is the fable of the ant and the grasshopper. In a field one summer day, a grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to its heart content. An ant passed by, bearing along with great toil an ear of corn while he was taking it to his nest. "Why not come and chat with me," said the grasshopper, "instead of toiling and moiling in that way?" "Well, I'm helping lay up food for the winter," said the ant, "and recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter?" said the grasshopper. "We have got plenty of food at present." But the ant went on its way and continued its toil. When the winter came, the grasshopper had no food and found itself dying of hunger. And while it saw the ants distributing everyday corn and grain from the stores they had collected in the summer, then the grasshopper knew it is best to prepare for the days of necessity. So that's the story. Now, let's first talk about who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Who did it right and who did it incorrectly according to the story, generally speaking.
So if you listen to this fable and you read it, I right away came away with, and the first time I did, I remember thinking, yeah, I've got to prepare. I've got to be almost over-prepared for days that are coming where I might have scarcity, right? And that's, I think there's probably a moral to that. I mean, it tends to teach virtues of hard work, right? And if you're not prepared, right, these bad things can happen to you.
Yeah, I think that's probably the takeaway most parents get. I would have to assume if a parent read this to their child, that would be kind of the chitter chatter after the story. See, son or daughter, see, it's good to prepare. It's not always good to just live in the moment. But, again, who is actually more correct here? And you've got some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I do. And part of this comes from my life right now, Jared. I've got a daughter, 16-year-old, who is working really hard. Both my girls do, but I feel as if did I over prepare her for life in that she's seen me work really hard, and now I see her. She's doing this CNA thing, and she's working some nights and trying to balance out life. And I want to go to the cabin this weekend, and I'm finding she wants to stay home and work. And I think it's this. What did we do here? Yeah. What did we do wrong here? And I think there's nothing wrong with her work.
Right.
And I think I'm contemplating. Have we taught enough balance in life? Have we taught enough to have our children both just work very hard and want to do that? Because I know many retirees that are like, the next generation doesn't work hard enough. But we also have to remember to balance things out, right? So I dug a little deeper in as I read this fable, and as I've been contemplating and praying and thinking about this. And obviously, how do you balance this out? Well, you got to have balance, and we know that. If you take the ant specifically and what the ant was doing, I came away just like you did after hearing that story. If you're listening to this and probably think, the ant did it right. And I dug a little deeper. I said, well, what is the lifespan? How long does an ant typically live?
Right.
Unfortunately, the ant lives 3 to 4 months. So now you've got somebody who has prepared all of this food. And yes, there is a group of ants that are going to be able to eat that. And of course, we know that's part of how they'll survive for the winter. But that particular ant actually did not get to enjoy life at all because they only lived for 3 to 4 months.
Right. So again, let's put this in the context of retirement planning and what conventional, financial or retirement planning wisdom will say. Again, through that lens, the way that I see it, and I've heard it over the years, the ant is also the good guy and doing it right. But there is a balance, and where is the break point? Where is the point where we have now crossed the threshold where now it's almost too much, where we have worked and toiled too much for the future?
Well, we like to.
It's a tough question.
It's a super tough question, but I tend to think about it as I know it's not what we've been doing. I think as a society, even in our profession, I don't think we're doing it right. Which would say, hey, you start saving when you're young, and you save and you save and you save and you save and you save,
right.
And then you hit 65, and then you start spending.
Start living.
Yeah, you start living. You put off those things that you've wanted to do for so many years, and we talk so much about life deferral with clients and how we agree. You got to save and you got to prepare, but many people take it too far, and then they do what I think is one of the worst ways of planning is they die with a whole pile of money and it goes to their children.
That's a whole series of show. You just opened up a whole bag of worms there on that particular concept alone about the problems of oversaving and also dying with almost too much, which again, if you line it up with conventional wisdom, that's the point. The point is to start saving early. We hear that all the time. I mean, that is like the most basic of financial class 101. Start early and use compound interest, and you have your pedal to the, put the pedal to the metal until you turn 65, and then there's this break point where you can finally release and then potentially die and leave all of this inheritance. And there's some flaws with that mindset.
Yeah, there is. And I think many times we take things too far one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I could see if you're hearing this and they say, man, I'm not going to save anymore. Don't hear that. That's
not what we're saying.
That's not what we're trying to get across. But I think the ant does some stuff right, mm-hmm. right? I mean, and I even look at, what the Bible says specifically calls out the ant. It does. It says in the book of Proverbs, It says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest." So I read that, and I'm like, there certainly is something to being prepared,
Right.
and we know that. But that verse also, if you read it, it says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard." Who are they talking to, right? Who is that meant for? Yes, there's wisdom in planning, but specifically to a sluggard. I don't think that that verse, if I'm reading that myself, and I'm a person who typically puts my work ahead of people and can struggle with that. I don't know that specific verse is for me.
Sure.
In that, because I do not feel like I'm living that way. So I think there's certainly a part of balance with all of life. We've talked on this show in the past about work and what work means and how God created us to work. There's nothing wrong with work. It's a great thing. Yep. But I think when we take it too far, and when it becomes, when we know we've saved enough and we keep doing it because we want what's next, and the goalpost keeps moving, and we're trying to just attain more things, is where I step in and say, well, there might be something amiss here.
Yeah, there's always any good thing can be taken too far and it becomes a bad thing. And I think the ant and the grasshopper represents two sides of the pendulum, where you have the real conservative, frugal, put your nose to the grindstone, work as hard as you can, as long as you can. And again, on the other side of the pendulum swing is the grasshopper, kind of the free spirit. Just we're going to live in the moment and just take it one day at a time, not too worried about tomorrow. The truth is that we'd be foolish to only live for today and live as if we're dying tomorrow. But we're also foolish to say, to put all of our eggs in one basket and overcompensate for the future by sacrificing what the opportunities today provide.
Yeah, when you get in that life deferral mode, that's what we call it. Is like, I'm going to defer life at the same time. So what I would encourage people to hear today is, yes, I need to be somewhat of the ant and the grasshopper. I need to be deferring. I need to be saving for the future and planning and providing for my family. That's good wisdom. Yeah. But you can take that too far. And if you, in an ideal world, right, you have these experiences. Not only when you retire. You and I have talked about that a lot lately. It's you look at the brochures on TV with retirement, and you Google it, and you see this picture of a husband and wife, in their 60s, I'm sure mid 60s, and they're holding hands and they're looking out on the ocean and
with a
wine glass.
Or something like that.
So I look at that picture, Jared, and I have never had a client come back from, even if they've spent time down south or they're doing it. Yeah, we just love sand between our toes, and at our age, there's nothing better than a big bottle of wine. I mean, at that point, it's like, it's not going to happen. And by the way, I'm taking more antacid medicine. The reality of it is that does not happen. Okay, so that is for us. That's for our industry. Puts that out there to say, hey, you, Mr. and Mrs., you're in your 40s. Someday you want this, right? No, I want that now, right?
Exactly.
And maybe if we balance it and we become part ant, part grasshopper, we can have those experiences earlier in life and yet still prepare enough for the future.
That is a foundational message I want people to hear, and we're going to dissect that further in the weeks ahead. Me personally, Ben, I'm the ant by far. I have always worked hard, and I'm not saying, I'm the work hard, but I've deferred life. If I have to be honest, I've deferred life and put tasks before people and experiences for the majority of my life. Now, you know this because we're about the same age. I'm actually older than you, for everybody listening. I'm 6 months older than Ben. But not for the first time, but I see why people start to awaken to this in about their midlife, because I'm starting to see that now. And my kids are getting older. You have kids a little bit older than me, Ben, but my oldest is now 11. And I'm starting to awaken to some of these things to say, like, man, my kids are never going to be this age ever again. And is it wise to save and to build wealth and save for the future? 100%. But if I have to be honest, I have wafted way too far to one side. As this started to actually get a little bit more real for me, you know this, Ben, and I'll share this with everybody else. We live on a hobby farm. We've got a pasture of 10 acres and have horses and stuff. And I love motorcycles. And on a whim, without really spending a ton of thought into it, while my son was at camp earlier this summer, I bought him a dirt bike and surprised him with the dirt bike on the way back. And I wouldn't normally spend a couple of grand on a dirt bike. That's just not something I would typically do because I tend to be a little bit more frugal and conservative with bigger purchases. Well, I got to tell you, man, when I'm out hanging outside and he's bopping around our pasture with the neighbor kid who's also got a dirt bike, I think I'm getting more enjoyment out of it than he is, you know? And I said to myself, he's only going to be this age once. I would be a fool not to spend a little bit of money. But again, in my aunt mindset, I could justify that 1,000 ways. Well, instead of a couple of grand on a dirt bike, we could put that into a savings account and put it into an I-bond, and I could get 9%. You could break it down 1,000 ways financially and justify it. But how do you justify sacrificing experience and potential memories? And that's a tough one to do.
It is. And I think one of the things I'll, remind our listeners today is the real value of that dirt bike, the real value of those memories is the compound interest, if you will, of those memories, right? So the more powerful a memory is like that, you get to enjoy that now for not 5 years or 10 years or 20, Lord willing, you and your son will bring up those memories years from now versus just today. Yes, it's valuable, but the memory is such a valuable thing down the road. So I look at the things that I've done with my family, and I look at the things I've done with my daughters and my wife, and I think the real value isn't necessarily even that immediate experience. It's the memories of that experience later on.
Well, again, what people need to understand in retirement, especially close to the end of your life, the only thing you have at that point is memories, because your health is declining. You may or may not have a ton of money or a ton of time, free time. It really won't matter. We've got to kind of reverse engineer this process a little bit and understand that concept.
Yeah, it sounds kind of depressing the way you put that, but the reality of it is our health goes downhill. After a certain age, it doesn't get any better. We keep getting potentially less and less healthy as we get closer to the end of our lives. So when I look at that, I have often been inside of nursing home facilities or home care where you talk to somebody, an aging client, and they bring up most of the time these great memories. Sometimes they bring up the hard ones, but it's always what they learned from them and how those memories shape them to who they are. But I enjoy those conversations, and I never have people who say, I regretted doing this or that. It's always, I regret not doing this or that. And I think that's a key differentiator there. And I think the other thing I've never heard anyone say in that moment is, I wish I worked more. I've never heard it. I say, I wish I worked more. I wish I had a nicer car. I wish I do hear them. I wish I had taken more vacations. I wish I enjoyed more time with my family. I wish I got, I spent more time with the Lord. There's so many things that people say, I missed this or that, but they don't say, I wish I worked harder. Again, it's a balancing act. What we're going to try to do in the next few shows is help people really balance that out.
So let's break down this show here in the last minute or so. So the ant or the grasshopper, who had it right, Ben?
Neither. No. Yeah, I really think neither of them did. I think there's probably a combo of both, but neither of them really got it perfectly right, and mainly because the ant realized at some point, I'm sure, I'm not living forever, and I can't just work my entire life.
So conventional retirement planning wisdom will tell you that life begins at 65 when you retire. True or false?
Very false. And in fact, I would tell you that life began, obviously when you were at inception, when you were created, right? And you were created for a work, and you were created for God's kingdom in some form or fashion. So how you're going to plug into that, how you're going to find your purpose in that, and also some of that is work. We know that.
It can be. It certainly can be.
It can be part of your story and what you do, but also part of it is how you live your life, how you impact the people around you. And there is definitely a rhythm to life where you work and you rest and you enjoy life as well.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this conversation about the ant and the grasshopper. So what do you think? In what ways are you saving too much for someday and not living enough for today? Or in what ways are you living too much for today and not saving for the future? We believe that you can have both, but it's a delicate balance that is completely dependent on everyone's specific situation. Want to get that conversation started for you and your life? There's a way that we can help, and it's absolutely free. Here's what I want you to do. Go to our website, retirerepurpose.com, and click on Breakthrough Call. There's a link right at the top of the page. And during this call, we're going to get crystal clear on 3 things: what your dream retirement looks like, life experiences you want to have, and ways you can start experiencing them now. One more time, the way to schedule this call, go to retireepurpose.com, click on Breakthrough Call to begin your repurpose journey today. Until next time, I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you then.